the CIA, if you want to talk about anti-democrat policy. Reminds me. Folks, I saw in its entirety last night The Darkest Hour. This is the movie about 4 years, 1940 to 43, 44, about the period where Neville Chamberlain and his group in the House of Parliament wanted to make a peace deal with Hitler. Hitler was scorching the earth. Hitler had invaded Czechoslovakia, Poland, Norway, France, and Neville Chamberlain and his buddies were trying to force Churchill, who was a compromised prime minister, to authorize them to go have Mussolini act as the middleman in peace talks so that Hitler would leave the UK alone while he rolled over the rest of Europe. And the movie is it's a fascinating thing. I watched this thing last night, and I was drawn to it because of the uncanny relationship it has to certain political events in America today. I'm not comparing what we're up against is Hitler. Don't misunderstand. But we're having arguments in our country over American strength, American uniqueness, America as a superpower, or should we pare ourselves down because we're illegitimate superpower? We don't deserve it because we've stolen, our founding is illegitimate, all the stuff that Obama popularized, the American left now believes and is taught. And this is a historical look back at what Churchill was up against and what had to happen for the United Kingdom to survive and win. It's not a war movie. You're not going to see blood and guts. You're not going to see battle scenes. There's only one thing in this movie that slightly bothers me. But I think I know why it was done. In the movie, Winston Churchill takes a ride on the London subway. And on that ride in the London subway, he receives inspiration from the British people. The people on the subway car almost unanimously tell him to fight, 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 fight. Surrender to the Nazis, surrender to Herr Hitler, no way. Now, Churchill never rode the subway. I know enough about Churchill to know he never rode this. In this instance, the thing that bothered me about it at first was the movie makes it look like Churchill drew his inspiration and his intellect from the people of the United Kingdom. And the purpose of putting him on a subway car is to show, because it comes at a point in time where Neville Chamberlain and his gang are doing everything they can to force peace talks with Hitler. And Churchill's on the verge of agreeing because they're about to lose their army at Dunkirk. They're about to have the entire British army, 300,000 troops, wiped out at Dunkirk. They're about to be incapable of waging war. So the movie takes Churchill to the underground, goes on a subway, gets off at Westminster. It didn't happen. But what did happen is during the war and during the Blitz, when the Russians were bombing the hell out of London, the Germans were bombing the hell. Well, what did I say? The Russian? Same difference. When the Germans were bombing the hell out of London, with the V-2 rockets, and Churchill would leave and go to the site of some of the devastation, and he would talk to the people there who had survived, and it was a mutual event where he would draw inspiration from them and vice versa. And I'm guessing that the people that did this wanted to portray Churchill as not an autocrat, but rather as someone who was connected to the British people, which he was. But Churchill knew he was a great man. And by that, I mean Churchill knew that he was unique in intellect, unique in talent, unique in abilities, and so forth. And that's portrayed well. It's tough doing biographies and pictorial portrayals of Churchill because he's such a complicated person that you can't synthesize Churchill in an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, even a mini documentary. But after I watched all of this, I could not pull myself away from it. Even though it's not an action-packed movie, I couldn't pull myself away from it because the use of language, Churchill was precise, said what he meant. He had a unique command of the English language, but it portrays a man who was up against what he thought was total opposition in his government for what he thought was the right thing to do. It wasn't total opposition, but there was a significant portion of the British government that wanted to cave and give up and negotiate a peace deal with Hitler and hope that Hitler would allow the UK to survive and remain independent from Germany. And Churchill said, "Are you people nuts?" He didn't say those words. And the movie is the progression through that. And thus they put him on the underground, I think, to help explain where Churchill's resolve came from. It's a minor point. It isn't any kind of big deal. And, of course, it doesn't claim to be historically 100% accurate. Gary Oldman plays Churchill, and just awesome. I'm not an expert in trying to tell you when an actor's done a good job or not. But he stayed in the character that he became throughout this movie. Language, facial expressions, makeup, it was. And even though there's not a whole lot of ram-bam warfare action, I couldn't pull myself away because my brain was entirely captivated by this movie. Even though you know how it's going to end. It's called Darkest Hour, and I stand by what I said when I'd only seen about 20 minutes. If it comes to a theater where you are, go see it. Now, look, one more note about Hitler and Churchill in Germany. There are some who say that had there been negotiations between the UK and Hitler, that Hitler would have allowed the UK to remain independent, to keep its monarchy, to have no changes, and Hitler would take everything else. And the reason they say this, they say this, get this. Well, Hitler thought that they were a bunch of Anglophiles like him. And Hitler was of the impression that they would be sympathetic to what he was trying to do in wiping out Jews and people of color, non-Aryans. Look, folks, I know there are people who think that because people who want to sue and negotiate for peace never leave. But there is no way, even if Hitler originally thought that, Hitler would have soon discovered that the UK was not sympathetic to what he was doing, and he would have overrun them. They would not have had any way to resist. They wouldn't have had any way to stop. This movie is about one man's courageous resistance to incredible force and pressure to choose the path of least resistance and peace and so forth. It does a great job of encapsulating some of the greatness of Churchill, and that's why I think it'd be wise to see it.